Well, hello again and welcome to our study. Parable number 30 of the parables of Jesus. This is the prodigal son. And this prodigal son, he lost his inheritance, but he didn't lose his sonship. How does this actually work? Our text is taken from Luke chapter 15. We'll start in verse 11. And Jesus said, a man had two sons. The younger one told his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So the father divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered everything he owned and traveled to a distant country. There he wasted it all on wild living. After he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. So he went to work for one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his field to feed pigs. No one would give him anything, even though he would gladly have filled himself with the husks the pigs were eating. And he came to his senses and he said, how many of my father's hired men have more food that they can eat? And here I'm starving to death. Continuing in verse 18, I will get up, go to my father, and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and you. I don't deserve to be called your son anymore. Treat me like one of your hired men. So he got up and went to his father while he was still far away. His father saw him and was filled with compassion. And here's the key verse. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him affectionately. Verse 21. And his son told him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and you. I don't deserve to be called your son anymore. But the father told his servants, hurry, bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his fingers and sandals on his feet. Bring in the fatted calf and kill it, and let's eat and celebrate. Because my son was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and has been found. And they began to celebrate. Verse 25, now the father's older son was in the field, and he was coming back to the house. He heard music and dancing. So he called to one of the servants and asked what was happening. The servant told him, your brother has come home, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he got him back safely. Then the older son became angry and wouldn't go into the house. So his father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, listen, all these years I've worked like a slave for you. I've never disobeyed a commandment of yours. You've never given me so much as a young goat for a feast that I could celebrate with my friends. But this son of yours spent all your money on prostitutes, and when he came back, you killed a fatted calf for him. His father told him, my son, you're always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and has been found. Well, the prodigal son is something you can relate to. You either were one, are one, have one, had one, or you know one. This parable is easily conveyed as many return home, having tasted the anguish that a sinful life provides for them. Sin promises to serve and please, make you have a good time and have a good life, but in the end it slaves and dominates and destroys. Well, eventually this wayward son finds himself in a deep, dire hole, deep, dire debt. He's hungry, starving to death. He's feeding pigs. Well, he wasted it all and found himself in a pretty despicable position. No self-respecting Jew would be found caring for swine. Having reached the bottom, he makes his long and humble trek home, and that must have been a long, hard road to come home. Very humbling. The father gladly receives him, and at his homecoming calls for a celebration. Now his brother, the one who returned, is less than jubilant. He sees his brother as one who'd wasted his inheritance and was unfaithful. He'd insulted the family, and the list goes on and on and on. Initially, the older son is less than excited as his wayward brother is gladly welcomed into the family fold. Jealousy rages as he considers his faithfulness and his brother's lack of stewardship. Finding fault with those who squandered their fortune in the affairs of a wicked, raucous life is normal to siblings that are less ecstatic at the return of one who has insulted the family. Well, alarmed at the thought that his inheritance will be forfeited, the father quietly assures him his portion will not be lost. See, normal culture held that the eldest son was to inherit half of the father's wealth, which often left the youngest with little to nothing. If you were the second or third or fourth or fifth one, you didn't get very much because your oldest brother, he got half. And what the prodigal son had squandered couldn't be replaced. He lost his inheritance, but not his sonship. He lost his inheritance, but he didn't lose his sonship. In verse 22, we see an unusual observance occur. Upon his return, the son was probably in rags, another testament to the wages of a sinful life. The robe mentioned here is likely an outer garment of sorts. The father told him to put him in the best one in the house. That's generally reserved for the festive occasions and maybe people that were of greater honor, but not a wayward son. We see he's given a ring. To wear a ring on the hand was one of marks of dignity and wealth. The rich and those in social positions commonly wore rings. To give a ring was a mark of favor or affection. Here it was an expression of love of the father. You see, to place shoes on his feet was a sign of love as well, because servants usually wear shoes. A son returned, doubtless without shoes, a condition very unlike the way he left. When therefore the father commanded them to put shoes on him to express his wish that he should not be treated as a servant, but as a son? And the meaning of all these things is images is the same. God will treat those who return to him in honest repentance with godly love and affection. God as well runs to meet the wayward son or daughter that comes home. It was a Jewish custom that if a son was to waste his inheritance by such means and by associating with Gentiles, which he would have done because he was with someone who raised pigs, he was to be cut off from the family. This process they know is kazaya, which allowed for a large pot to be broken or shattered, which was a sign that he was totally rejected from the family. Those who gathered to witness the event would shout, "You are now cut off from your people. You're cut off from your family." And they would break the pot, meaning that he has broken his relationship with the people and with the family. Well, fortunately for this young man, his father allowed for the prodigal to be welcomed back into the family. It is this kind of love that God will allow for those who will humbly seek him and confess their sins. See, there's no greater love, no greater showing of love or definition than total forgiveness, whatever you've done. Again, a celebration is essential when a lost soul finds its way home. And should we be so lucky as to observe one who comes home, then we can know true joy, for God celebrates as well. You see, I know firsthand this type of joy. In all things, God welcomes the wayward son back into the family fold, always. Sincere, heartfelt repentance, there's the key, will prompt God to receive even the worst of sinners back in the arms that are open wide. To hear "Welcome Home" is music to any ear. A robe, a ring, a pair of shoes, and a crown await those who are willing to come home to the Father. And when Jesus sees you standing on the porch, he runs to you. If you're wayward, come home. Yeah, it's humble. Yeah, it's not easy. Yes, it's difficult to say I'm sorry, I was wrong. But Jesus always welcomes honest, sincere repentance. And it doesn't matter what you've done. As long as you're breathing, you can come home. I hope that you do. So I hope that's been helpful to you. Be safe, be blessed. And if you're out there, come home. We'll see you in the next study.